Welcome everyone to the third and final part of the Chaffinch in Soft Pastel tutorial series. I hope that you've been enjoying it. If you have landed on part 3 first, then do go and check out the other 2 parts which take you step by step through this entire painting. So let's make a start on the final part. So I'm going to come in with the black new pastel first. There's quite a lot of shadow on the sticks. The branches are quite in shadow, and of course it's not going to be jet black, but I'm going to get a good bit of that darkening of the tonal value done with the black pastel. Just a bit of an idea of the tonal value of the twigs or branches. So the same on the slightly bigger branch, it's darker towards the bottom. So I'm just gonna very roughly block in the tonal values. Lighter towards the top of the branch. We've got a little flower growing out of here. So hopefully the flowers and the little additions on the branches here won't take too long. In my recent sparrow painting, well, the background was just really complicated. It took me quite a long time to just get through the background. It's a really good one if you want help with lots of flowers and leaves. Definitely a bit more of a complex background than this one. I tried to keep this one a bit more simple, both for the demo to give you a selection of different types of background to put behind your birds, and also for my own sanity, just to give myself an easier project right after a more complicated one. So this other branch now, that's a lot lighter in tonal value because it's obviously sticking out into the daylight a bit more, so it's going to be a different colour mostly. And I don't think I'll bother adding the bit of plant life that's growing off of that branch in the distance. So what colours am I thinking for the branches? Ideally at this stage of a painting I want to have already used most of the colours and not be picking up lots of brand new colours at this stage. So the first branch that I'm going to look at is the one that's furthest away, and I'm going to drop in lots of the darker colours towards the bottom of this branch, colours that have already been used in the painting. Dark purples, perhaps browns, greens. You can bring all sorts of colours into a branch. It's not necessarily going to be just brown. And you can really play with the colours that you decide to pick up for something like this. You can steer it more in a certain direction if you want to. It doesn't have to be exactly the colours that you're seeing. The main thing I'm seeing about this branch that's further in the distance is the fact that it's quite light, so it's catching the light a lot more than the rest of the branches. And to me, the light tonal value of this branch is good because it helps the tail feathers of the bird really stand out from this little section of background. So I'm just going to drop in a few darker colours. This is A34 now. Yeah, purples. Purples for branches, why not? I'm just going to start building up towards what will be the lighter top section of the branch. What can I block that section of the branch in using? Perhaps I'll just take a little bit of something slightly warmer and more neutral just to add a little bit of colour. So this is A27. I'm really just experimenting with the colours on the branch. Especially this branch because it's quite bright in the end. So I'm just going to lay in a few colours first. Something that can show through the top colours a little bit. So this is a good example of when I'm not really going for the colour that it needs to be in the end. The first colour that I'm putting down is often something that's going to get used to add depth or contrast, not necessarily the colour I want the branch to be in the end. So I suppose I'm trying to look at the little grains of texture on the wood. What colour are they? That's the colour that I need to add down first. And then I can start building up. I think I'll add maybe a bit of green along the branch. Green always looks pretty good on a branch for many reasons. There might be little bits of moss growing on the branch. We might be getting some reflected light from, or reflected colours from all of the greenery around. So that's how I'm really thinking about the colours in something like this. It's building up the texture of the branch a little bit, not going for what needs to be the overall colour right away, leaving myself some space within the layers that I can build up to it gradually. So on this branch we do have a little bud, but I'm actually going to just ignore it. We've got enough to deal with on the other branches, so I'm making an executive decision there to ignore the little bud that's running along this branch. But I can perhaps try to add a little bit of some of the little nodes on the branch. Don't know if it's really necessary. I want to try and keep the branches relatively simple and quick to do, and not really distract too much from the little bird, because I really love creating backgrounds, and sometimes I love to create a very busy background, and I feel like I did that with my recent sparrow painting. I really went for it with the background in that one. So I want to kind of contrast that now with a nice simple background. So what colour will I add along the top of this branch. It's really quite bright, so I'm thinking my light 13, the very light lilac colour, and I'm going to run that along the top part of the branch. So this highlighted section of the branch is going to hopefully contrast really nicely with the teal feathers. So I don't want to bring that light 13 too far down the branch really, because we're only getting that brightest bit of highlight right along the top of the branch, and it's not even really that bright as we go further along the branch. This branch also starts to get a little bit of a out of focus feeling because it's further away from us. It's behind the bird, not a great distance away, but in this type of photography where you really place the focus on one area, you can create quite a lot of depth of field even when it's quite a small scene that you're painting. So I think I'm just going to simplify this little branch. I'm not going to bother with any of what's going on in the center here. If I'm not going to include the bud, then I'm going to simplify a little bit of the branch as well. So I just want to take my finger now and gently blend that. And I don't mind if I lose the crisp edge on this branch in particular, because I want it to feel like it's further away from us. And of course I'll need to come back in and neaten up the tail feathers again. So this is a good example of why I always do the little background sections first, because when you try to do the background around a subject, it usually creates a bit of a mess. It's a much cleaner way to do the background, I think, by putting it in first. Definitely in soft pastel anyway, perhaps not in all mediums. So again, I have repeated mostly all colours that have been used already in the hopes that that starts to really tie the image together, make everything feel like it knits together nicely, that it's the same light bouncing off everything, tying it all together. So you really got to think about the lighting that you're trying to capture and how that lighting is affecting absolutely everything within the painting. So a nice light coloured branch back there to help create contrast. And let's just neaten up the end of the tail feathers. And of course you can clean up the tail feathers from the other side as well with a little bit of a lighter coloured pastel pencil. So yeah, let's get some color blocked in on the other branches, because really that might be enough for that branch. If I put just a little bit of extra detail in the other branches, then that's going to help a lot at creating that sense of distance between the three branches within the composition. I can use my blending tool just to try and soften and shape some of the little areas of detail, and just bring a bit more of that dark bottom edge up through the branch. But yeah, I don't think I'm going to overwork this branch. Let's move on to the other branches and see how it looks. So again, this blending tool, just great for working little edges, getting right into these little corners like here where my fingertip just doesn't fit in there. I'll make a mess. So it's nice to have that extra bit of precision for certain bits of blending. Okay, so that's the first branch pretty much done. May even just run a little bit of a light blue across it. Really, when I look at the branch, it's very cool in tonal value. And that's not how I've painted it. My branch looks quite warm. But it still looks okay, so it shows you as well that even if you do pick slightly different colours from what you're seeing in the photo reference, you can still absolutely make something realistic happen. What tends to be way more important is your tonal value. If you get the tonal value correct, you can push colour quite far. But how light or dark the colour is, that's usually quite important. If you get that correct or close, you can have a bit of fun with your colour choices and still end up with something quite realistic in the end. So the other branches are darker. I've put a lot more of the black new pastel in to begin with. So I think I will also do the same thing here. I want the branch to remain quite dark in general, but I also want to bring in some colour. And again, especially towards the top edge of the branch. We've got to try and show where some of the smaller branches join. So let's just get a little bit of colour running across the branch first. Again, this goes behind the bird, and normally I would have that done first, so that when I'm painting the nice crisp edges of the bird, it really comes down over the top of what I've already worked. But you'll see as well that it's not impossible to do it the other way around either. I think I was just enjoying painting the little bird so much that I didn't want to stop and switch over onto the branches at that stage. So I can also use the pastels at this point on their sides. I'm trying to think of the cylindrical shape of the branches and try to give that sense with my marks, so curving them around the shape of the branch a little bit. Just like I talked about curving, creating that curvature around the chest of the bird. And I'm not blending too heavily. I want to keep some sense of the texture that I'm creating with the pastels here. That's going to help me create the texture of the bark a little bit. And then on this branch it's really quite dark, coming just up at a different angle, catching the light differently. So what colour do I want? I think I'm going to add a bit of darker brown into the base of this twig. We've also got a very dark section where this twig or smaller branch joins the bigger branch. Again, a bit of green is great usually on a branch. But honestly, when you think of branches and twigs, I'm sure that the colour brown pops into your head. And quite a lot of the time I really don't use a lot of brown for branches. So I'm seeing like backlighting on this little branch that the bird's actually on. So I'm going to try and run a bit of BV15 just down the edge of this branch. Just searching for a little edge on my pastel. And again, where there's more light hitting the branch, I can see more of the texture. Can't see that much of the texture in the darker areas, but up towards the top part of the branch here, I can see a bit more of the texture. This time, this branch not catching quite as much light as the bottom one. We do get a bit of brightness along the top edge. So the three branches, they're all kind of sticking out in different directions, and that's why they're all getting lit quite differently as well. They're all catching the light differently. So I'm just trying to make those little highlights look like they're coming over the top of the curve of the branch. Again, using the marks to try and hint at the 3D nature of this, that it's not just a flat object that we're seeing, that it has form. Oops, just slipped. Very easy to sort out most accidents though. Just blend that light colour back in and go again. And perhaps I'll even use a light blue here because we start to get a little bit more muted in the highlights as well. Again, just twirling the pastel around until I find a suitable little edge that's going to make the marks I need. So there is a little flower and stem in here, and I'm going to do that one. I'm going to include that one. So I haven't decided to leave all of them out, just the one on the bottom branch. Again, just being careful around what I've already worked on the bird, but I can tweak at the edges of the bird again just to finish that area. So I think I'll continue with this lighter blue. This is BV9. I'll just continue with that. I think that's pretty good for this bit of highlight over here along the top edge. So any little highlights running along these branches should stand out nicely because we've got quite a nice dark background to show up against. And again, any longer marks that I'm making are kind of curving like this, almost a C shape, just to give a sense of the 3D form. Again, another little triangular shape here that's tricky for me to blend with my finger, but not with this little tool. And I'm trying to see this little edge of reflected light on the bottom of this middle branch. So edges are so important. They can really make or break your painting, just how you have contrasted certain edges against other sections of the painting. just want to look for this other edge, this smaller branch that the bird is actually on. So the reason I don't pick up the pastel pencils for all of that finer work, like doing little edges like this, I just won't get the same strength of colour from the pastel pencils. So most of the time I would rather fiddle about a little bit and try and get the pigment from the sticks where I want it. So yes, it would be easier if I could pick up the pastel pencils every single time I needed a very fine, delicate little line, but the compromise you make with the pencils is just in the strength of the pigment, so it's very hard to get a very bright, light coloured line somewhere using just the pencils. So as always, I keep checking over my shoulder, looking in the mirror behind me on the wall. That really helps me to see when I start to get the 3D effect to click together, because sometimes when you're looking directly at the thing, it just does not look right, and then sometimes just either stepping away from the painting or catching a glimpse of it from a different angle. And that's why I love the mirror, because quite often if you can't see what's wrong, just flip it over or look at it in a mirror, and sometimes what is missing really jumps out a lot quicker. So I can use the pencils now to help me clean up the edges. But that little bright coloured edge that I'm trying to create is better done with the soft pastels. And then I can come in and make small adjustments using the pencils. So because this branch is extra dark, I'm actually going to run a little bit of the dark Terry Ludwig up here as well. So these branches predominantly purple, green and blue really. So very little to do with brown. So again, just final little touches around the feathers here where I can now finish them. Got that little area of colour in behind them now. So I just want to add a very subtle little bit of light coming up this edge just to try and help it sit apart from the background. So in this case I am bringing in the pastel pencil, the blue one, because I don't want a very strong line, very subtle little line there just to separate part of the branch from the background. And the same around the rest of the branches. Quite a lot of the branches have this little aura of light that we can just see at the edge of it. So of course I've still got the feet of the bird and several little flowers to work. So just using the black pencil here to shape a few little areas again. Perhaps I'll try a little bit of pastel pencil. Very, very subtle edges that I want here on a few bits of the branch. So I'm just going to give myself a quick idea of outline again here, because it's kind of got lost in the painting the background stages. So let's get these little twigs and flowers added. Just want to give myself a little bit of an outline again. I'm not leaning too heavily with the black pencil. I don't want lots of black lines to contend with in a moment, but if I do it very lightly, they will disappear as I paint over them. So it's all just little shapes that I'm going for. I'm looking to just get those main shapes down. This does not have to be absolute precision, just want some little blasts of colour. Try and replicate what I'm seeing here. I've missed out a little section of background here, so maybe I've got even enough pigment on the paper I can just smudge it up in there. And then one final bit of flower down here as well. Little sprig. Lovely little sprigs of flowers coming off the branches. So I'm using the black pencil now. I'm leading a little bit in some areas just to create certain bits of darkness, little bits of shadow. Even the little flowers are casting bits of shadow onto the branch. And for anywhere that I want to make it extra dark, dropping a little bit of the Terry Ludwig in there too. Some of these little branches are pretty dark and they really stand out against the background. So the branches aren't looking too bad now, I think. I can certainly look at them for a bit longer and try to add more details, but they are, on the whole, when I look behind me in the mirror, they look okay now in terms of tonal value. So I think what I'll do is I'll work on the little feet, see if I can get the bird completed, and then all I've left to do is this little collection of flowers. So I'll look at this leg on the left first. Picking up a little bit of the black new pastel just to bring in some of the black, because The feet are pretty dark in some places. And I think I'll probably have to resort to pastel pencil for the details on them. I want to lay in some of the dark purple as well. Seeing a lot of purple. So I just try to aim the purple in roughly the right place, and then coming back in with the pencils, I can make the necessary small adjustments. So what I'm trying to do is aim a few very delicate little bits of highlight along the curve of the claws. And I'm using BV10 for this. So not as light as you might think. And a tricky operation really to try and shape the claws on this scale. So blender being used for small little areas as well. So I'm just very subtly lightening a little area of background here, just to help that top edge of the claw stand out a bit better. And then again, trying to make the background look nice and smooth and uninterrupted. So the little feet are quite dark. We're not really able to see too much of them. Just want to get a hint of those little claws, and it's almost like the bird has little knuckles here at the top. So I'm not looking for an immense amount of detail here, just a little hint. And then the final thing that we'll work on is all of those lovely little flowers. So we're almost there. A little bit of BV10 as some highlight. Just trying to find a reasonably sharp edge on the pastel. I'll even pick up the other piece, the other half of this broken piece, just to see if I can get a little edge to run down into the point. And then of course I can use the pastel pencils to help neaten this up. So there's a bit more light catching the little foot on the right, and we've just got a little bit of brighter highlight on this claw coming around the back here. Really not a lot I can do on this scale, they're really tiny. And when that's the case, I just try to focus on what I can capture, which is a general sense of the light and shade on the claws. That's about it, really. I can't go into much more detail on this scale. So what I've got to try is to just depict the tonal values as close as I can get them and hope that the effect works. And all the time, don't forget to get a bit of distance away from the painting, because it probably starts to click into place much sooner than you think. Sometimes when you're sitting with your nose up really close to the painting, everything looks terrible, and then you just take a little step back, have a look at it with a bit of a different perspective. Because quite often we end up working on further than we actually needed to in some cases. So yeah, I think that's okay for the claws. So let's add some of these colourful little flowers in. So we've got one little bud down here. I'm just going to block in a bit of the green section first. A little bit of purple towards the top of the bud. So we've got extremely light coloured little leaves or petals, I'm not sure which, just around the main bud. And they're quite pale in colour. I want to try and capture that because they'll stand out from what is a reasonably dark little painting. The whole background's pretty dark. So I've got an R15 for a bit of the pink, just to add a little bit of vibrance. Little flowers are quite muted in this though because it's not a sunny day. We're quite in the shade here. I think I'll just come in with some actual white here on the petal or on this little leaf to the side. So coming in with the big sticks, but I can do a little bit of tweaking and adjusting at this in just a moment with the pastel pencils too. Just trying to lighten couple of the leaves or surrounding petals. And a bit like with the branches, there's a little bit of backlighting going on as well. So what can I do now with the pastel pencils to try and sort of shape this a bit better? So I can shape things a little from the background as before. I can also come in with my white pencil but the aim with these flowers is to not take forever on them. They're just little blasts of colour. I don't need them to be super detailed. What I'm doing here is just trying to accentuate the little stem that comes up off the main branch. So I'll move on to the other flowers, hoping that that's probably enough detail. Even the other flowers that are in this area are actually a little bit out of focus because they're sitting behind the bird. So let's just quickly get them blocked in, like the bottom one. So I'm using green 14. It's actually not quite the green that I'm seeing in the photo reference, but I've decided to just make use of the greens that I was already using in the background rather than picking up some extra colours at this stage. So we've got a good bright highlight coming down both of these little stems. I'm just using my light lilac pencil for that. So just shaping those little stems, adding highlights, adjusting the shape of the stem using the background colour. So just like on the bird, these little buds themselves have a sense of the light coming from the right side. And they're not overly vibrant because they're not catching an awful lot of the light. Quite a lot of them is in the shade. I just want to add a little vibrant touch of pink here and there though. And then with Grey 3, which really is quite a light coloured green but reasonably muted at the same time, not too vibrant, just adding some bits of highlight. So I'm just trying to block in the shapes of the little flowers and petals with something roughly in the right direction of what colour I'm looking, and then I'll come back in and make those smaller adjustments. I can work the edges of the leaves and the petals. And then of course the pastel pencils, when they come a bit later, help me just to get a few nice bits of detail here and there. So I don't need them to be really detailed. So my light lilac pencil now is very useful at this stage, just to find the edges of some of these leaves and petals. Also for just toning down the colours a little bit. You can see that I can kind of mix this light lilac into what I've put down already. And it kind of tones down the colour. Just mixing a bit of this cooler tone into the pinks and the greens here. So now I've got light 13. Let's start to bring in some of the brighter highlights. Just trying to soften some of the highlights with some blues as well. So we're kind of into fine-tuning stages now. And of course you can add as little or as much detail as you want on these little flowers. I really just want them here as a blast of colour and to not be too distracting from the little bird. And at this stage, little edges and smaller bits of detail are often done with this blending tool. Just gives me a bit more precision when I'm shaping the edges of things like this. So again, light 13 just to add some highlights here. And as I'm doing that, I'm blending a little bit as well, just to soften the flowers, set them back a little bit in terms of detail. So I come in and I add detail, but I also kind of knock it back and take it away a little bit as well. So just working the background around the flowers. So just a final few little hints of vibrance, because sometimes when you overwork an area with pencil, you kind of lose all of those lovely vibrant colours. So I just want to add a few little dashes of vibrance back in. And I've got the nice vibrant green, green 32, that I used some of in the background. Just bringing out those greens again. So I think I'll leave it at that for the flowers and the petals. Even try to knock them back just a little more. But I think for the purposes of this demo, we are just about done. So we've made it to the end, and I hope that if you've been painting along with me, that you have your own little Chaffinch painting now too. And I hope equally that if you've just been watching along, that you've enjoyed the journey and that you've picked up some nice tips for your next soft pastel paintings. If you would like to see my full library of tutorials, a bit like this one, then do check out my website, emmacolbertart.com/tutorials, and here you can browse my entire library of tutorials before even signing up. Then if you would like to learn along with me, Patreon is where you can sign up and gain access to all of my content. So I hope that some of you will join me over there. And I really hope that you guys have all enjoyed this here on YouTube. Currently sitting at 45,000 followers here on YouTube, and I'm so grateful to you guys for showing me that support. So if you haven't already, please do hit the subscribe button here on YouTube and show me some support here. But thanks very much for watching, and until next time, happy pasteling.